Sam Neill. 2 months before he died, a man stood in front of a camera and said the one sentence every cancer patient prays they'll get to say out loud someday. No cancer left in his body, not a trace of it anywhere. He looked genuinely stunned by his own good news, and he even started talking about the next film he wanted to make. Then, on July 13, 2026, with no warning at all, he was gone. He was 78. His family used a word in their statement that stopped people in their tracks: sudden. Not a relapse, not a slow decline anyone saw coming, just sudden, and cancer-free. Two facts that should never sit next to each other, and yet somehow did. Within hours, tributes poured in from people who almost never comment publicly on anything, prime ministers among them. But it was something Nicole Kidman said, about a friendship that started on a boat nearly 40 years earlier, that explained better than any official statement why this loss landed the way it did. In April of 2026, only a few months before his death, Sam Neill sat down for an interview in Australia and delivered the kind of update most cancer patients never get the chance to give. A recent scan had come back clean. No cancer anywhere. He called it extraordinary, and the way he said it suggested a man who had genuinely stopped expecting to hear anything good, someone almost surprised by his own relief. For years he had been fighting a rare and aggressive blood cancer, called angioimmunoblastic T-cell lymphoma, a diagnosis he first shared with the public in his own memoir back in 2023. At one point, chemotherapy simply stopped working, and by his own account, he found himself in a genuinely frightening stretch, the kind where doctors start preparing you for the worst instead of the best. He ended up qualifying for a clinical trial involving CAR T-cell therapy, a newer treatment that reprograms a patient's own immune cells to go after cancer, with far more precision than standard chemotherapy. It worked well enough that by the spring of 2026, he was sitting in front of cameras, talking about remission and floating the idea of taking on another film role, sounding, by every account, like someone who believed he still had plenty of years ahead of him. He'd said more than once in earlier interviews that death didn't frighten him, a line that read very differently to people once they heard it again this past week. 2 months after that hopeful scan, none of it seemed to matter anymore. On July 13, 2026, Sam Neill died in Sydney, Australia, at St. Vincent's Private Hospital, surrounded by the family he had spent decades putting ahead of his career. His family's statement, posted to his Instagram page, described the loss as sudden and unexpected, and noted that he remained cancer-free at the time of his death, a detail that only made the timing feel crueler to everyone who had just watched him celebrate weeks earlier. No cause of death was included in that initial statement. Days later, his longtime agent, Philip Grenz, told reporters that Neill had died of pneumonia, saying he wanted to put an end to inaccurate reporting that had been circulating. The family's statement thanked the staff at St. Vincent's Private Hospital by name, a small gesture that said something about how they wanted the story told, with gratitude rather than public speculation about what had gone wrong so quickly after such encouraging news. He was 78 years old, and only 2 months earlier, he'd been telling reporters he felt like he had his future back. Within hours of the announcement, tributes began arriving from people who rarely weigh in publicly on anything, including heads of government, at a pace that reportedly caught even seasoned entertainment reporters off guard. But the reaction that explained the loss best, more than any prime minister's statement could, came from a woman who had known Sam Neill since long before most of the world knew who he was. In 1989, a barely known 18-year-old actress named Nicole Kidman was cast opposite Sam Neill in a tense psychological thriller called Dead Calm, playing a young wife trapped on a boat with her husband and a dangerous stranger who comes aboard in the middle of the open ocean. It was one of the earliest major roles of her career, the kind of part that can either launch an actor or quietly end things before they've really begun, and the pressure on a teenager carrying that much weight in a film was enormous. Neill, already an established actor with a decade of work behind